Express my gratitude for being here today and for seeing all of your beautiful faces. I surely don't deserve to be here, so I'm very humbled to be standing here to tell you a little bit about the organization that I chair on Saipan, which is where I was born and raised in the Northern Mariana Islands. Next slide. So this is the logo for our organization. It's an indigenous Chamorro-led community advocacy group that works to bring awareness, research, and education about militarization to the local and regional community, but specifically in the Northern Mariana Islands. It's a movement that responds specifically to the issue of militarization, which warrants the dedication of an entire organization because this issue has become so prevalent in our lives. I know this has been, next slide please. I know this has been discussed briefly, but I'm glad it was in the previous discussions because in order to assess this question of where we are, this idea of where we are, we have to take a look at the bigger picture here related to the military-industrial complex and the sheer amount of money that's being poured into military spending by the United States, a country in which we currently maintain a strong political relationship with as a U.S. Commonwealth. So according to the National Priorities Project, the United States consistently spends more than 50% of its discretionary budget on militarism, and the United States funds war at a level much greater than any other nation, despite the very frequent propaganda we get of anti-China rhetoric on the islands and about Chinese military spending. So this puts U.S. military spending in context. In a new report published by the Stockholm International Peace Research Institute, global military spending reached a new peak of $2.4 trillion. And the Mariana Islands makes up an important part of this story because a chunk of this funding is going to bolster military planning in the region and specifically for war preparation, where we are at the front lines of preparing for this quote-unquote future war. Next slide, please. So, in most history books, at least in the United States, our islands make their appearance during World War II, during the Battle of Saipan, between the Japanese and the Americans. And the word that's used most often is this word strategic. In geopolitical and military terms, really, our islands, their use value is connected then to their strategic location for the military. And this is a term that even we in the community throw around so often, it just kind of rolls off our tongue. We even use it to describe ourselves, right? We are a strategic location. And sometimes we even feel special by saying that. We confuse it with being special, I think. Importantly, this places us in a really precarious position when it comes to militarization, because in early negotiations over our political status in the islands, our leaders agreed that in exchange for self-government, with our internal affairs, that we would give the U.S. control over foreign affairs or quote-unquote defense. Next slide. And so the Pentagon has continued to view the entire region of the Marianas Archipelago as one open bombing range, essentially. Can I pull the microphone off? It's okay? Okay, sorry. It might be easier this way. Calling us, so if you see here on the left side, our entire archipelago, including the surrounding sea and airspace, is called the Mariana Islands Training and Testing Study Area. It's just under 1 million square nautical miles. And I juxtapose it here I'm connecting it here with the Hawaiian Islands Range Complex. And Noelani Goodyear Kaupua pointed out that together these complexes and the transit corridor between them creates America's largest training and weapons testing area in the entire world. Next slide, please. So not only are we strategic, but there's another ideology and strategy that's currently being promoted by the US Pentagon that's working to transform our islands into backup bases, essentially. And so we are now forming this important part of what they call dispersal, or dispersing forces throughout the Pacific. And I think this was just a quote that really captured that sentiment. We'd like to be able to make our presence more geographically distributed, more operationally resilient. Maybe the future is going to be less about bases and more about places. Being able to operate across a multiplicity of locations which give us the flexibility and the agility. Of course, we are at the receiving end of that strategy. So next slide, please. You can keep clicking because I think there's a, yeah, thank you. So Tinian, which is an island in the northern Marianas, is a very important part of the Pentagon's conceptualization of dispersing forces. You can click, yeah. And already 2/3 of the island of Tinian is DoD controlled under a lease. But in 2017, Tinian was chosen as what they called a preferred alternative or a divert airfield in the case that Guahan was bombed, basically. So they're using this island as like a backup base. And it's particularly striking because they also plan to build a pipeline, and there's only one source of potable water on the island. So if the pipeline broke, needless to say, it would be disastrous. You can continue to. But also, and this is on the bottom right is an aerial shot of Tinian and all of the different plans that the military plans to conduct. But Tinian, if you have not or you don't already know, this was also the site of this is a memorial of the atomic bombs that were used to be dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. So this island is now being remilitarized, turned into a base once again. Yes, and then sorry, if you go back just very briefly, I just wanted this list of plans, or all of the multiple plans that the Pentagon has slated for the Mariana Islands in the upcoming years, including the transfer of thousands of Marines, which has been an ongoing project for, I think, about 15 years now, of different Marines from Okinawa throughout the Pacific, right? So we're part of this move. Okay, next slide, please. I also just wanted to show that one of the islands, one of the smaller islands in the Northern Marianas is called Nu'us and Chamorro, which is the indigenous language, but it's often called Farallon de Mendeniza. It's been bombed since the 1970s by the Pentagon, and this is something that even our own people we don't think much about because it's become so commonplace, so part of our everyday life. Next slide. So in one of we have some community meetings that we've had to bring more awareness of these plans, these military plans and militarization in the CNMI, and this is one of the quotes that I wanted to share by the women responding, one of the Chamorro women responding to this question of how are you personally impacted by military planning? And she says, my memories of what families went through prior to, during, and after the war, my readings about atrocities of war in recent times and ongoing conflicts, I think we are all impacted one way or another. The problem is to think deeper and analyze the possible consequences of militarization on people in islands like our Pacific. The plans are very stressful for many of us. We do not know what will happen, just like what happened to our people during World War II. They were caught in the middle and many were killed on both sides. They were left to fend for themselves and their own homeland during the war. And so these are some of the reflections that women are having in the kind of bombardment of war preparation that we're seeing on the islands. Next slide, please. So I just want to share really quickly some of the work that the organization that I've been honored to chair has been doing. One of them was that after so many years of seeing increased militarization happening before our eyes, our community members have outwardly continued to express their discontent and about all of these unknowns. And so our organization was really brought together largely by one of our highly respected elders who you can see sitting in the middle at the bottom there. Her name was Sintakai Pat. She's been a very long time advocate for demilitarization in the CNMI, and she really has pushed the next generation to continue to demilitarize. And we came together to work on this House Joint Resolution in our local legislature to, you can click one more time, to oppose any increase in destructive military training and testing in the Northern Mariana Islands. We knew this was a long shot. It was a lot to ask in a resolution. It passed in the House and then it failed. The governor did not approve the resolution and it lost support within his administration. However, it garnered enough support for the community to come out and really start asking questions about why there's so much military planning happening and nobody seems to be involved. Next slide, please. Maybe one more? I mixed it up, sorry. So one of the things that we do is we try to connect the militarization of what's happening in the Marianas with the broader Pacific, right? So two of the examples here are of the increasing militarization that we're seeing in Palau at the same time that we're seeing in Yap, and sometimes our organizations get together to use different kinds of toolkits and information sharing so that people are more aware about how to comment, specifically on environmental impact statements that come out in the community. And so one of the toolkits on the left was, a place where people could just click on it, and it was in conjunction with another really wonderful organization on Guahan named Protehilitekdan Save Retidian Represent. They're here. And so what we do is we allow the community to kind of click through these toolkit to find more information about what these plans are so they can submit their own comments, because most people don't have the time to sit down and submit these in their daily life. Maybe go back to the... Yes. And then we also contribute to, a lot of narrative work. We're trying to rework this idea that, war is inevitable and that nuclear arms bring peace to the region, which is something that the governor of Guam recently had mentioned in a Radio New Zealand interview. And so, we're really trying, and this was our organization along with others that really tried to push back against this idea that these nuclear weapons, given the history of testing in the region, can somehow bring peace. And lastly, I just wanted to share with you this really, this example that really, it just hits me at the core every time I see it, because it was something that was happening in the CNMI community, and it was an event called Pet a Jet. And so at the same time that a military exercise was happening in our waters, it was called Coke North, they were inviting all of the school children. So I was getting it on my phone for my kids, please come. And then I was seeing it in the newspaper that to please bring your children to come pet a jet. At the same time that this exercise was happening, right? And so we work, again, a lot of narrative work in the community that we try to promote in order to switch this idea, right, that it's somehow fun, that this is somehow something we shouldn't really be paying attention to, and in fact, take it more seriously, right? And definitely don't promote it to school children. And so I will wrap up. If I get, next slide, please. If I get back to the theme of today's framework, which is where we are, I realize that this statement often transforms really in our daily lives into this question of where are we in all of this? It's a question that we continually ask ourselves amidst this sustained war preparation. And in the context of demilitarization activism, we're always asking ourselves, where are we now? So this is a very important framing question when you're thinking about militarization, because it's really difficult often to keep track of the minute details that accompany so much of the massive changes that we're seeing happening on our landscapes. And so, again, as that one woman mentioned, right, these plans become overwhelming and it's really hard to see the bigger picture. And not only that, but women in our community at least have historically been at the forefront of asking this question, where are we? My time is up, I'll end with this. To ask where we are in this state, in this state, is not just a statement of fact, it's political. It means to witness, it means to keep track, it means to keep people accountable. It also means to ask where our voice in all of this is. And if we don't ask or challenge, quite literally nothing stands in the way of increasing military planning. At least this is in our community, especially when it's framed in the context of economic development or as a necessary part of living in the Pacific. And so as our indigenous Chamorro culture really values respect, community, and humility. And so it's really been in this space of smallness that's been our power, that is used to downplay our islands. The military often uses the smallness as a way to downplay our islands, and it's imaginary, but we use it to bring hope. So alongside all the other women in the Marianas, we're working slowly towards shifting these narratives, and again, I'm very grateful that we get to share just this small story with you. Last slide. I'm done, but I just wanted to share with you a small donation that we got, and we created a scholarship in memory of two of our founding members of our OCW, Sinta Kaipat on the right and Retta Sue Hamilton on the left, who are both really unapologetic, amazing women that led the way for us to be here today. So this is in honor of them.